She had spent decades building a life, raising a family, caring for others, moving from place to place, always putting someone else first. Her home was filled with things collected over the years: souvenirs, gifts, notes, cards, and keepsakes from moments that once felt unforgettable. But now, standing in her own living room, she felt something she couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't just the clutter she saw on the shelves or the boxes stacked in the corners. It was the quiet heaviness. A sense that the things around her weren't giving her comfort the way they once did. They were crowding her space and crowding her thoughts. She wasn't alone in feeling this way. For so many women in their 60s, 70s, or beyond, life after retirement comes with an unexpected shift. The roles they played for so long, the doer, the giver, the caretaker, start to fade. And what's left behind? Often, it's piles of objects that whisper stories from the past. But the future? That part feels distant, undefined, sometimes even buried beneath too much stuff. This story is for her, and for anyone who's ever looked around their home and quietly asked, "Where do I begin?" Because this is not just a story about decluttering a house. It's about releasing the past with love and making room for peace and possibility in the years still to come. The emotional weight of things. She didn't realize how heavy it had all become until one quiet afternoon, sitting at the edge of her bed, she opened a worn cardboard box filled with scarves. Some were neatly folded. Others were wrinkled with time. There was the floral silk scarf from her first trip to Paris in her 30s. Another, hand-knitted, came from her daughter on a Mother's Day long ago, and several she couldn't quite place. But she had kept them anyway. Each piece carried more than just fabric. They carried fragments of her life. A laugh shared over wine, a soft breeze from a springtime walk, a look exchanged with someone she once held dear. She hadn't worn any of them in years, but as she gently touched them, she felt something deeper. Not sadness, not regret, just the undeniable weight of memories. Like so many women of her generation, she had spent a lifetime caring for others, raising children, supporting a spouse, maintaining a home. And through it all, she had kept so many things. Not because she needed them, but because they told the story of who she had been. The truth is, the clutter wasn't just on her shelves. It was in her heart, in her mind, in the roles she was slowly stepping away from. Letting go wasn't about getting rid of things. It was about choosing which pieces of the past she wanted to carry forward, and which ones could stay behind with love. That realization didn't come all at once, but it was the beginning. The shift from holding on to moving forward. After she retired, she imagined that organizing her home would be easy. She pictured quiet mornings with coffee in hand, calmly going through boxes, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to toss. She thought, now that I finally have time, I can finally get this done. But the reality was different. She found herself moving things, not out of the house, but from room to room. One pile became another. One box got stacked on top of the next. The same items passed through her hands again and again without resolution. It wasn't for lack of effort. It was the overwhelming emotional weight behind each decision. A faded baby blanket, a drawer full of letters, her son's baseball glove from high school, her daughter's glitter-covered kindergarten art project. Each item was a doorway to another time, a moment she was afraid to close. And yet, something in her had begun to stir. A quiet question she couldn't ignore anymore. She asked herself, am I still this person? Or am I someone new now? It was a question that felt uncomfortable at first, but slowly, it opened a new way of thinking. She started to see that her home had been designed around the woman she used to be, the caretaker, the planner, the organizer of birthdays and holidays, the one who always made sure everyone else had what they needed. But now, in this new season of life, She was no longer living in those roles every day, and her space no longer reflected who she was becoming. She wasn't discarding her memories. She was choosing which ones still needed physical form and which ones could live quietly, safely, in her heart. This shift wasn't about erasing her past. It was about creating space, emotional and physical, for peace, for clarity, for the version of herself she was learning to love now. And that was the beginning of something beautiful. The mouse moment, a turning point. It happened in the attic, on one of those hot and heavy summer days in New York, the kind where the air feels thick and still. She had decided that morning would be the day she finally tackled the old storage space upstairs. The attic had become a resting place for all the things that didn't have a home, but also didn't seem ready to leave. She figured it was a good place to start, high up, out of sight, far from the spaces where daily life happened. She brought up a box fan, a bottle of water, and a pair of old gloves. She was determined. What she didn't expect was the mouse. Well, not just one mouse, a family, living deep inside her son's old golf bag. The moment she reached for the bag and felt something move, her whole body froze. Then, in an instant, a tiny creature leapt out and scurried up her arm. She let out a scream that echoed through the rafters, dropped the bag, and stumbled backward, heart racing. It was terrifying. It was disgusting. But most of all, it was her breaking point. That was the moment she realized this wasn't just about clutter. It was about chaos. The kind of quiet, creeping chaos that builds up slowly over time, until one day, it spills out in the form of mice in a golf bag. She stood there, sweating and stunned, and thought, "This is not who I want to be anymore." The attic had become a symbol, not just of disorganization, but of avoidance. All the things she hadn't dealt with, all the stuff no one wanted to touch, all the decisions she had postponed for years. And it took a mouse, or rather, a whole mouse family, to shake her out of it. That day, something shifted in her. She didn't just want to move boxes around anymore. She wanted clarity. She wanted peace. She wanted to feel proud of her space again. Not because it was perfect, but because it felt like it truly belonged to her, to the woman she was now. Sometimes, it takes a moment of discomfort, even panic, to move us forward. For her, the mouse was the messenger. The 30-day reset, a gentle plan for change. After the attic incident, and after a long, cold shower to recover from it, she knew she needed more than just motivation. She needed a plan. Something simple, manageable, and kind. Not a massive, overwhelming checklist, but a structure that would support her without exhausting her. That's when she came up with the idea of a 30-day reset. It wasn't about rushing. It wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, little by little, with intention and heart. She broke it down into 4 weeks. Each week had its own focus, its own rhythm. And instead of trying to declutter everything at once, she gave herself permission to move gently, one step at a time. Week 1. Bathrooms and junk drawers. Starting small, starting strong. She didn't begin with the attic this time. She didn't start with the garage, the closets, or the mountains of boxes in the guest room either. No, this time, she started small. And that choice made all the difference. It began with the junk drawer in the kitchen, the one everyone has, full of rubber bands, expired coupons, mismatched screws, pens that no longer worked, a flashlight with no batteries, and keys that belonged to locks long gone. For years, it had been a kind of catch-all, a little drawer with big energy. It didn't look like much from the outside, but opening it made her feel instantly overwhelmed. She used to open it and quickly close it again, promising herself, one day. But this time, one day had arrived. She took the drawer out, placed it gently on the kitchen table, and let herself breathe for a moment. No judgment, no rushing, just curiosity. What was she still holding onto in this drawer, and why? One by one, she sorted. She tested pens on a sticky notepad, tossed the dead ones. She found a roll of Scotch tape with just enough left to seal a letter and smiled. There was a tiny screwdriver she didn't even remember buying. A note in her late husband's handwriting, reminding her to pick up milk. She held on to that. The drawer didn't just hold clutter. It held little memories, but it also reminded her of the importance of limits. She chose to keep only what was truly useful and truly meaningful. The rest? She let it go with gratitude. Then she moved to the bathroom. The cabinet under the sink was a small space, but it had slowly become a maze of half-used bottles, expired medications, forgotten travel-sized toiletries, and hotel soaps. She gathered everything, laid it out, and examined it with new eyes. She thought, would I use this today? Not, did I spend money on it? Or what if I need this someday? But simply, would I choose this now? That one question helped her decide more easily than she expected. And when she put things back, fewer things, more purposefully, she felt something surprising. Lighter, calmer, in control. She had always thought big change came from big effort, but now she saw the power of starting small. These spaces, though tiny, were victories. They reminded her that she was capable, that change didn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. She didn't need to fix her whole home in a day. She just needed to start with a drawer, a shelf, a cabinet, and that, in itself, was a beautiful beginning. Week 2. Closets and Clothing. A new look at the woman in the mirror. Her closet had become a kind of time capsule. A quiet museum of seasons past. Folded sweaters from when she lived in the Northeast. Summer dresses she wore in her 40s. Blazers from her working years, lined up like soldiers, ready for a meeting that would never happen again. Every time she opened the closet door, she felt a mix of nostalgia, guilt, and confusion. Should I keep this, just in case? What if I lose weight? What if I need it again someday? But in her heart, she knew someday wasn't coming, and clinging to the clothes of the past was keeping her from fully stepping into the woman she was today. So on a quiet afternoon, she made herself a cup of tea, opened the closet wide, and decided it was time. Not for a purge, not for punishment, but for honesty, for clarity. She began with a simple question. Would I wear this tomorrow? That question, gentle but firm, became her guide. She touched the denim jacket she wore on a road trip with her husband decades ago. She smiled, remembering the breeze through the car windows and the laughter over bad gas station coffee. But she hadn't worn the jacket in years. The memory lived in her heart, not in the fabric. She let it go and said thank you. She found the sweatshirt from her daughter's lacrosse games, soft, oversized, full of warmth and pride, but also too big, too worn, and too tucked away. She took a photo of it and saved it in an album labeled Mom Moments. Then she folded it and placed it in the donation pile. Some decisions were easy, others took time. There were pieces she tried on, looked in the mirror, and asked, does this reflect the woman I am now? If the answer was no, she let it go. And here's what surprised her most. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. Each hanger she cleared was a small victory. Each shelf she emptied gave her room to breathe. The more space she made, the more clearly she saw herself, not just in the mirror, but in her life. She didn't want to live surrounded by clothes for a version of herself that no longer existed. She wanted her closet to feel like a quiet celebration of who she was today. Wise, strong, comfortable in her own skin. And that feeling, that quiet confidence, was worth every decision. Week 3, Kitchen and Garage, where memories and just in case live. She stood in the middle of her kitchen, surrounded by drawers and cabinets that had quietly filled up over the years. The kitchen had once been the heart of her home, full of movement, meals, and laughter. But now, it mostly served one person. Still, every drawer was packed. Baking tools she hadn't used in a decade, mismatched mugs, gadgets she no longer remembered how to use. The pantry shelves were lined with spices long expired. There were 3 kinds of cookie cutters, though she couldn't remember the last time she baked with the grandkids. At first, the idea of going through it all felt overwhelming, but she reminded herself, one cabinet at a time. She opened the drawer next to the stove, the one that had become a clutter zone for spatulas, bottle openers, and takeout menus. She emptied it slowly, wiping the inside clean. And then she asked herself, what do I actually use? That question became her guide through the entire kitchen. She kept the cast iron skillet she loved, the coffee mug with the small chip, because it still made her smile. She let go of the rest, not in bitterness, but with thanks. Then she moved to the garage. This space held a different kind of weight. It was a mix of tools, half-finished projects, seasonal decorations, and dozens of boxes marked someday. The garage had become a resting place for everything that didn't belong elsewhere. She found camping gear from when the kids were little, a tent, still packed, still dusty, old cans of paint, broken garden tools, boxes of cords and electronics from who knows when, and in the corner, a stack of bins that hadn't been touched since the last move. At first, she hesitated. It felt like opening a vault, but once she started, she realized something. Most of the things she had saved for just in case had never actually been used again. The cost of keeping them was space, both physical and mental. So she kept what made sense, what was current, what truly fit her life now. And the rest? She released it. She let the space breathe. And in doing so, she felt herself breathe more freely too. Week 4. Paperwork, photographs, and memorabilia. The heart of letting go. This was the week she knew would be the most emotional. She had prepared herself for the boxes filled with paper, old medical bills, utility statements, appliance manuals. But what she wasn't quite ready for was the other kind of paper. Birthday cards from decades past, letters from friends who had passed on, drawings made by little hands that were now grown. She created 2 piles, one for documents, the practical, necessary things, and one for memories. She started with the documents. She sorted gently but firmly, shredded what was no longer needed, filed what mattered, and for the first time in years, her desk drawer closed without force. Then came the photographs. Stacks of prints, envelopes from old camera shops, boxes labeled with years or vacations. Her children as toddlers in Halloween costumes. Her own wedding photos. Pictures of her parents, now long gone, smiling in faded sunlight. It took time. She didn't rush. She allowed herself to remember, to cry, to laugh. She made folders for each child, gave herself permission to keep the most meaningful and let the rest go, or pass them on. Then, she found the bin labeled keepsakes. Inside were medals, plaques, awards, dried corsages, baby shoes, and tiny sweaters that once fit in the palm of her hand. She held each piece like it was a sacred object. Some she kept. Others she took photos of before letting them go. And something unexpected happened. The more she let go, the more deeply she remembered. It wasn't the object that held the memory. It was her. Her mind, her heart. Her life was not stored in a box. It was stored in her. She invited her children to go through their bins with her. They sat together, laughing over childhood drawings, remembering school plays and soccer tournaments. It became not a task, but a shared celebration of a life well lived. When it was all done, she looked around and felt lighter. Not because she had discarded her past, but because she had honored it, carefully, intentionally, and then made space for the next chapter. Memories are not in the objects. Letting go without losing love. At the beginning, she had whispered it to herself like a quiet warning. If I let this go, will I forget? The question followed her from room to room, as she opened drawers, lifted photo frames, held on to baby shoes and old sweaters. For decades, she believed that memories lived inside objects, that if she parted with the thing, the moment it held would vanish too. But slowly, gently, that belief began to shift. It started with a dress, a soft, elegant piece she had worn to her daughter's college graduation. She hadn't put it on in years. It no longer fit. Still, she'd moved it from closet to closet, home to home. When she held it, her fingers trembled slightly. She remembered the breeze on the campus lawn, the tears in her daughter's eyes, the sound of her name being called. But here's what surprised her. The memory didn't come from the dress. It came from within her. The moment was hers, with or without the fabric. That realization was quiet, but it was powerful. She began to understand that the love, the laughter, the life she had lived, none of it was stored in boxes or drawers. It was in her voice, her thoughts, her stories. It was in the way she talked about her children, the warmth in her eyes when she told a joke from years past. The memories didn't need to be carried by things. They had already shaped her. They were her. Still, some objects deserved space. There was her mother's brooch, passed down through generations, the recipe card in her mother's handwriting, stained with butter and time, the small figurine from her honeymoon, chipped but still holding 1,000 quiet joys. She didn't want to live in a museum of her past, but she didn't want to erase it either. So she created a new rhythm. Keep one, let the rest go. She chose a single baby blanket instead of 5, one letter from each child, a few photos from each chapter of life, the ones that made her smile instantly, without explanation. She placed them on a shelf, in a special box, in a frame by the window. Not hidden, not hoarded, just held, with care. She began to see the difference between clutter and meaning. Clutter distracted her. Meaning grounded her. And in that space, cleared, calm, and truly hers, she found herself more connected than ever. Not weighed down by memory, but lifted by it. Not cluttered by guilt, but surrounded by love. Letting go no longer felt like loss. It felt like trust. Trust in herself, in her memory, in her future, and in the quiet after the sorting. When the house finally exhaled with her, she knew one thing for sure. The best parts of life are never packed away. They live in how we love, how we remember, and how we choose to move forward, with open hands and a full heart. Who are you becoming? As she walked through her home, now quieter, clearer, and more intentional, she didn't feel empty. She felt spacious. There was room to breathe, room to think, room to simply be. Each cleared drawer, each let-go item wasn't just a physical shift. It was an emotional one, a soft release of the past, not in rejection, but in reverence. She hadn't erased her history. She had honored it, and gently made space for who she was becoming. Because this chapter of her life wasn't about starting over. It was about continuing, with more clarity, more softness, more choice. For decades, she had been the center of movement, the planner, the provider, the person who made sure everything ran smoothly. But now she was asking a new kind of question. What do I want to make space for in my life? The answer wasn't loud. It was quiet, but true. She wanted ease. She wanted peace. She wanted connection. Not to old objects, but to her present self and the people she loved. She wanted her space to reflect not who she had been, but who she was becoming. A woman still full of wisdom, joy, laughter, and love. And in the stillness of her home, she felt something sacred, possibility. Not the rushed, frantic kind of possibility from her younger years, but a slower, more soulful one. The kind that whispers, "You still have time. You still have stories. You still matter." Letting go had not been about loss. It had been about freedom. And now, with open hands and a light heart, she was ready, not just to live in her space, but to truly inhabit it, fully, calmly, proudly. Not defined by the clutter of yesterday, but shaped by the grace of today and the hope of all the days still to come.